Benny's new album, Piano, out this week. Here he is with a special solo performance. But behind every one of those songs was a life far more complicated, far more painful, and far more human than the glitter ever revealed. Now at 78, he has finally spoken about her, about what it cost, and about what's really going on with ABBA today. This is not the ABBA story you think you know. From Stockholm boy to musical prodigy, music was never a hobby for Benny Andersson. It was an escape. It was the only language that made sense to him long before he understood the cost of choosing it. Benny was born on December 16, 1946 in Vasen in Stockholm. His father Gustav was a civil engineer who valued stability, and his mother Layla created a steady home. 2 years later, his sister Eva Lee was born. Their apartment was small, but it was filled with sound. His father and his grandfather Ephraim played the accordion with confidence and joy. They treated music as something natural and necessary. Benny watched closely and saw how melodies transformed his serious father into someone lighter and more alive. It was then that he slowly began to fall in love with music. When Benny was 6, he received his own accordion. At 10, he began teaching himself piano. No teacher corrected him, so he listened carefully and trusted music, his instincts. The piano gave him a sense of belonging that school never could. And so by 15, he left school to perform at youth clubs and small stages. His father was terrified that his son would end up broke and struggling with no stable future to fall back on. His mother lay awake at night, quietly heartbroken, wondering if she had failed him, if she should have pushed harder, held firmer, kept him in the classroom where she believed he belonged. But Benny felt a deep, unshakable certainty that walking away from music would hollow him out far more painfully than walking away from school ever could. During these restless years, Benny met Christina Granville, a girl who looked at him and saw exactly what he needed someone to see. Real talent, real promise. She believed in him without hesitation, and that meant everything. Then one day, their world turned upside down. Christina was pregnant. Benny was barely more than a boy himself with no steady income and no clear road ahead. The pressure came quickly, and it came hard. People around them urged him to ask Christina to end the pregnancy to protect whatever fragile future he had left. Benny refused. He looked at what was coming, and instead of running, he made a quiet, painful decision to stand firm. He had no choice now but to make it work. So he stayed longer in bars and smoky little venues, playing through exhaustion and fear, pouring everything he couldn't say out loud into his music. Some nights the money was barely enough to eat, but they held on. They scraped by on almost nothing, but it was something. It was theirs. And then just 2 years later, their daughter Helen came into the world. A tiny, beautiful reminder of everything they were fighting for. She didn't break them. She strengthened them. She gave them a reason that went beyond ambition or dreams. Now, it wasn't just about music. It was about her. They would not give up. They simply could not afford to. And so in early 1964, Benny and Christina joined a group called A Lit Spelleman Slag, a playful nod to electric instruments. They performed lively instrumental pieces like Baby Elephant Walk and traveled constantly chasing whatever work they could find. But performing alone was no longer enough for Benny. He began writing his own songs, driven by a hunger to create something that was entirely unmistakably his. But back home, something was quietly breaking. While Benny lost himself in rehearsals that stretched deep into the night, Christina was alone with 2 small children. She had believed in him from the very beginning, had stood by him when others said to walk away. But belief doesn't sue a sick child at 3 o'clock in the morning when their father is on a stage somewhere living inside his music. She asked for stability. She asked to feel like a partner, not a footnote. Benny promised her it wouldn't be much longer, that success was just around the corner, and he meant it. He truly did. But the corner never seemed to arrive. There was no single terrible night that ended them. It was slower and crueler than that, a gradual drifting, like 2 people standing on ice that was silently splitting beneath their feet. Christina needed a man who could come home. Benny needed music the way most people need air. Neither of them was wrong, but they could not save each other. When it finally ended, The silence it left behind was devastating. Benny carried the guilt of knowing what his absence had cost her. Cost them both. And Christina was left to raise their children, holding the broken pieces of a life she had sacrificed so much to build. Benny poured longing and conflict into his writing, and his relentless drive soon led him toward new collaborations and toward a band, the Hep Stars, that would change his life forever. The HEP Stars and a fateful partnership. The night Benny walked into rehearsal with the HEP Stars in October 1964, he arrived as a young man with a fierce need to prove himself. The band already had energy and charm, but they lacked direction. Music, the moment Benny sat at the keyboard, everything sharpened. His playing had a confidence that filled the room. Within weeks, he was no longer just the keyboardist, another in the fading light, and music felt it, too. Something rare was happening between them. Something that deserved to be protected. He had become the musical engine of the group. Teenage fans screamed his name. He had become a teen idol almost by accident. In March 1965, only months after joining, the band broke through with Cadillac. Benny drove that success hard. He pushed rehearsals longer, demanded tighter arrangements, and began writing original songs because he understood that covering other people's music would never secure their future. He delivered No Response, Sunny Girl, Wedding, Consolation, and She Will Love You. One by one, the songs climbed the charts. The HEP Stars transformed from a cover band into a group with a sound entirely their own. Then in June 1966, Benny crossed paths with someone who would change his life forever. The HEP Stars and Jörn Ulvaeus's band, the Hoot and Nanny Singers, found themselves on the same tour circuit, sharing stages and dressing rooms across Sweden. Night after night, Benny and Bern ended up side by side, talking music, swapping ideas, finishing each other's sentences. Bern was thoughtful and precise, with a deep instinct for melody and lyrics. Benny was instinctive and bold, capable of turning a simple idea into something that stayed with you for days. What one lacked, the other naturally carried. Their first song together, Isn't It Easy to Say, felt less like a collaboration and more like a conversation that had always been waiting to happen. Then came the night in 1969 that quietly changed everything. At Melody Festival, Sweden's most prestigious song competition, Frida was on stage competing with her entry, Harald Voryard. Benny was there in the audience as a composer. He had seen many talented singers by then, but when Frida began to sing, something inside him went still. A friend standing beside him later recalled that Benny stopped music mid-sentence and simply stared. He couldn't look away. After the competition, they were introduced backstage. They spoke about music deeply and easily, the way only two people who truly understand it can. Neither of them wanted the conversation to end. In the weeks that followed, Benny and Frida kept finding reasons to be in the same room. Rehearsals, recording sessions, late evenings that stretched far longer than planned. Music, what they felt was undeniable and eventually impossible to hide. When Benny finally told her how he felt, Frida didn't hesitate. She kissed him. Around that same time, Bern met 19-year-old Agnetha Fältskog on the set of a television music special in May 1969. She was already a star in her own right, gifted, beautiful, and quietly magnetic. Bern was captivated immediately. Before long, the four of them, Benny, Frida, Bern, and Agnetha, began spending more time together. They supported each other's work, harmonized for the pure joy of it, and discovered something in those shared moments that none of them could yet name. What began as friendship and music slowly became something far bigger than any of them expected. The birth of ABBA. In April 1970, Benny, Bern, Agnetha, and Frida stood together on a beach in Cyprus with no plan to make history. They were simply four Swedish musicians on a trip, laughing, relaxed, and far away from the pressure of studios and charts. Someone began to sing. Another joined in. Soon, all four voices blended in the warm evening air. What began as a joke turned serious within minutes. United Nations soldiers stationed nearby heard them and gathered closer. The four Swedes looked at. In January 1981, Bern married Lena Kellgren. Later that year, Benny married Mona Nerklet. the woman he had left Frida for. The four of them kept recording, kept standing at their microphones with their histories between them like open wounds, their voices still blending as perfectly as they always had, while everything underneath the music told a completely different story. The divorces left the two women standing in the wreckage of everything they had built and everything they had given. Agnia felt it first publicly, painfully, and without anywhere to hide. But the weight that would eventually fall on Frida would prove to be something far beyond what any of them could have prepared for. The first to fall. Agnia's collapse came first, and it came hard. After the divorce, Agnetha searched for stability in new relationships. None of them gave her what she was looking for. The life she had known inside ABBA was gone, and, without it, she was exposed in ways she had never prepared for. Nothing exposed her more completely than Gavander. He was a Dutch fan who had followed her career with an intensity that crossed every boundary a person can cross. She resisted him for years. Then exhaustion set in and curiosity replaced resistance. She later said, "After a while, I felt I could not resist anymore. I wanted to know him." They were together for 2 years. When she eventually ended it, his world collapsed. He began calling her at all hours of the night. She wrote him a letter telling him plainly it was over, that she wanted nothing more, that music, he needed to stay away. He took that letter and handed it to a Swedish newspaper, genuinely believing it proved they shared something real. That single act told her everything she needed to know about how unsafe she truly was. On Christmas Eve, he broke through the security surrounding her property and was found standing on her grounds in the darkness. She sought a court order and had him deported. Music, to her greatest shock, he came back. Then, on the eve of her birthday, he crossed back into Sweden and appeared outside her home again, telling police he only wanted 5 minutes with her. Agnia told authorities, "He has described our relationship as Romeo and Juliet. It is more like Jekyll and Hyde." She was taking medication just to sleep at night. She was living in fear inside the walls of her own home. She retreated into the Swedish countryside and vanished from public life almost completely. For years, she did not sing or even listen to music. When she finally released an album in 2004, she filled it with songs from the 1960s. Music from before ABBA, before the fame, before all of it had taken so much from her. As the years moved forward, the group eventually entered the period of recording the visitors. The mood had changed completely. The song spoke of failed relationships, political oppression, loss of innocence, and aging. But behind the music was a quiet tension that no one could ignore or dismiss. Frida and Agnia had to sing words that echoed their memories and bitter experiences. Benny and Bern had to listen to women they once loved bring those words to life. Outside, the world still saw them as a perfect group. Yet something fragile was happening beneath the surface of their fame. The innocence of the early years was gone, and the carefree laughter had faded. In its place stood maturity, experience, and sorrow that only they could understand. In 1982, ABBA made their final television appearance in Sweden. On December 11, 1982, they performed for the last time through a live link to the United Kingdom's Late Late Breakfast show. The band dissolved quietly and without fanfare. The years ahead would bring a different kind of danger for all of them. But it was Frida who would be asked to carry the unbearable, and she would have to carry it alone. Frida's cascade of loss. In 1992, Frida married Prince Heinrich Rousseau Reyes. She became Princess Annie Friedrich of Reuss and moved to Switzerland. The mountains, the quiet towns, and the serene landscapes became her new home. Music, it was a life far removed from the bright lights of the stage and the endless touring that had defined her earlier years. She sought peace and stability after decades of music, fame, and private sorrow. If only she knew the trials ahead would be almost unbearable. On January 13, 1998, Frida received a phone call that tore through her life. Her 30-year-old daughter and Liesel had been driving in heavy rain near Livonia, New York, a small town 20 miles south of Rochester. Her car collided with a truck. She did not survive. Frida flew to the United States immediately. She saw her daughter's body. She broke down beside her, crying openly, holding her, refusing to accept what had happened. Unlisa left behind a 9-year-old son named Jonathan. Frida had not only lost her child, she now had to look into the eyes of a little boy who would grow up without his mother and find a way to explain something that had no explanation. Those who worked closely with Frida said she refused to speak about it afterward. Not to friends, not to music colleagues, not to the press. ABBA's longtime employee, Gorel Hanser, confirmed that Frida simply did not want to talk. She had nothing left to say to the world. Years later, in one of the only moments she ever addressed the loss publicly, Frida said quietly, "It took many years. It is an incomprehensible sadness." Before the grief could find even the faintest edge, another blow arrived. Her husband, Prince Heinrich Russo-Royce, was diagnosed with lymphoma. He was 49 years old. The treatment was aggressive. Chemotherapy drained him. His body weakened visibly week by week. Frida stayed at his side through every hospital visit, through the physical decline, through the long nights when pain kept him from sleeping. She had just buried her daughter. Now she sat in hospital corridors, watching the man she loved lose his fight breath by breath. In October 1999, he died. She was with him at the end. Within 22 months, she had buried her child and her husband. Frida withdrew completely. Music, public appearances stopped. Interviews ended. She said later that what she experienced had created a loneliness so deep it gradually became natural to her.